Hello, my name is Samuel George London, and welcome to Comics for the Apocalypse. On today's episode, I speak to comic book creators and super duper dudes, Jonathan Stevenson and Luke Barmer Kemp, about what comics they would take into a zombie outbreak apocalypse. But before we get into it, I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, the Comic Scene Comic Club. Available from just £5 a month or £30 a year, you can get monthly issues of the History of Comics, Shift, Brawler, and even specials of Pat Mills's Space Warp. To find out more and subscribe to the Comic Club, visit comicscene.org. Now, without further ado, on with the show. Hello, Jonathan Stevenson and Luke Barmer Kemp. How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you.
Yeah, very good, thanks.
Excellent. Pleasure to have you here on what's a lovely summer's evening after probably about 10 days of grim weather. I don't know how it's been where you've been, but yeah, it's been pretty grim where I've been.
I've been enjoying the rain, to be honest. We had a few good days and I was laid up with hay fever constantly, just a streaming mess. So I enjoyed the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. We have very little airflow in our house, so it was nice to get a bit of a break from that and get some rain.
Nice, tidy. Yeah, and it's good for the grass, certainly, because I'm currently in my conservatory looking at my back garden, and the lawn is well overgrown now that it's had like a load of rain and some sun. It's like a combination for creating a jungle, but that's the way it goes. But anyway, thank you both for being here today. It's a real pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to have a dynamic duo on the show. But for anybody that hasn't come across either of you, what do you both do in the world of comics?
So I'm Jonathan, and in 2017 I became an editor at Titan Comics. Whilst I was there, we created the Statics Press imprint, which was it's a translated titles imprint, and I oversaw that. And I also was the editor on Doctor Who and Tank Girl, Wolfenstein, a few other things. And then since I've left there, I've been editing freelance. I'm currently working with Humanoids. And then since 2014, I've also been writing strips for small press comics like Future Quake in the UK and its sister publication Something Wicked. And Luke and I also did the Corbin comic by Self-Made Hero. We contributed to that. And now we've just written a series called The Disconauts that we're trying to get kickstarted.
Fantastic. And then how about you, Luke?
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm an artist for the Disconauts. That's probably my most notable thing to date. I actually met Jonathan when I was an art intern at Titan Comics. And if you have some old comics from about 2017 time, I think maybe, then you'll see my name with some art corrections and some editorial stuff for that. So that's fun. Other than that, I kind of moonlight as an architectural visualizer as well. So my main job is outside of comics, and I'm trying to break in.
Nice. Yeah. And before we get into the delight that is Disconauts, where can people find you online?
Oh, this is the bit we're rubbish at. There is a Disconauts Twitter account called @thedisconauts, and you'll find both of our personal Twitter accounts in the bio for that.
Perfect. And of course, folks, all of their links are in the show notes, so you can just click through and check out their work as we're talking. And definitely check out Disconauts. It's a load of fun. Thanks for the preview, Jonathan. Really, really good to see it and read it. I just want to know, before we get into our apocalypse, where did the idea come from?
Well, for a start, I'm glad you said load of fun, because I was wondering how that sentence was going to end. Load of what?
This took a turn. Oh my gosh.
So it originally began with me trying to come up with an idea out of my comfort zone. I'd been writing short strips, between 1 and 5 pages for a little while, and it wasn't supposed to be a series or even a full issue. I wanted to come up with something that was a bit different and kind of stretch myself a little bit. And I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe I was listening to a disco song or something at the time. And it sort of evolved into this thing it's a kind of a bit of a mashup of like animated shows we grew up with in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of 70s fashion and speech and things like that. And then there's the A Team is definitely thrown in the mix somewhere as well. So I guess there's a whole load of influences that were whirling around my head at the time that all spewed out into Disco Noughts.
Fantastic. And for you, Luke, did you have any inspirations for the arts?
So my inspirations really I tried to keep it as Jonathan wanted it. It was a kind of a love letter to the cartoons we watched as growing up. So I wanted to I didn't want to imitate that, because I think that's not within my style, but I wanted to have a little nod to it. So bright colors, cool characters, interesting poses, expressions, all that kind of stuff. And that's where it came for me, really. And one of my biggest things is that I actually built up a disco playlist to do as I draw. I like to listen to music as I draw, and I had a disco playlist, and Rasputin on there, Boogie Wonderland, all these things, and it really
Nice.
helped just get that feel. It kind of
Course.
almost brought the comic to life before I'd even put pen to paper.
Nice, like really getting you in the mood, and I can feel that kind of coming through, definitely. And for everybody that hasn't seen it yet, go to Kickstarter, search for Disco Noughts, and it will come up right there, and you can check out the campaign. And if it's your cup of tea, make sure you back it, because when this goes live, there'll only be a few days left. So act now rather than later. Now, all of that aside, unfortunately, I got some bad news for you guys, and that is, unfortunately, there's been an outbreak of zombies. Now, we've been through the ringer this past year, but it's just getting worse, essentially. My first question for you both is what is your action plan for survival?
I've weirdly thought about this quite a lot. We even
Excellent.
at Titan we had apocalypse buddies. When you started, you would pair up with someone, and in the event of an apocalypse, you were a pair, and you would fight it out together.
Nice.
I've always kind of thought, living in London, that the river would be the best place to head for. I'm assuming these zombies can't swim.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But I've always kind of assumed, I just go to the river and jump on a boat. In practice, I'm not sure where this boat is or how I get on it. But I've always assumed the river. You just need to get to the river. And it's the only time I've ever kind of wished that we had gun laws as lax as America, because I'm going out with maybe at best a cricket bat.
Excellent. How about you, Luke?
So I've given this a little bit of thought as well, and for me, it's the perfect time for me to escape. So I would go up into the mountains somewhere, probably find my way, trying to get my way to Scotland, up in the Highlands, some remote place. I think cities are where they're all going to be huddled, right? That's where I think the kind of nesting grounds are going to be. So if we can get as far away from that as possible, take my family, and do that, and just kind of live off grid, do forage and all that kind of stuff. That would be my plan, kind of under the
Nice.
radar.
Yeah, and then for you, Jonathan, would you have a destination in mind? Kind of once you've got on the boat, you've managed to get it started, and you're able to actually sail the boat up or down the river. Have you got an idea of where you'd actually go?
I think follow the Thames out to the coast, and then I don't know, try and get somewhere less populated. Especially, I suppose, if I went north, assuming there's enough petrol on this boat. If I went north for long enough, there are loads of like unpopulated Scottish islands where I could at least take a breather and be safe for a bit, even if I didn't have supplies. It's somewhere to sort of sit back and think and take stock and decide what's going to happen. But yeah, probably not the best place to be in terms of gathering supplies because there's no one there.
Yeah, no, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? But what I think has happened is that you've both managed to go your separate ways, but you've actually ended up in the same place on the Isle of Skye, up in Scotland, just by pure coincidence. And there happens to be a nice little house in the middle of nowhere that's fully stocked for a year ahead. So all of the loved ones that you wanted to take with you are there as well. So, and you're all sorted. It's kind of like the program that Ben Fogle was originally on.
Yes.
What was it called again?
Castaway.
Yeah, it was that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Basically kind of like that, I think. You're kind of all safe and away from any of the troubles of the zombie outbreak. One night, the conversation of comics comes up, the first question that's asked for both of you, because everybody's really interested, they're not really into comics or anything, but the first question they ask you is, what's the first comic you remember enjoying? And let's start off with Luke on that one.
Okay, so I came into comics relatively late, so about 2013, and if I remember correctly, that was around the time the New 52 was kicking off with DC. And one thing that really stuck out with me, and the first comic I remember really enjoying, was the Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder Batman stuff. That was just unbelievable. The art, the story, but I think the biggest one for me was the Joker storyline, the death of the family, and those ones, because they really just took that Joker and Batman duality and just flipped it, and I thought that was amazing.
Nice. And how did you actually get into comics? Did you only got into it in 2013? Did you just see it in a shop or?
No, so I worked with I worked at a marketing place, and a friend of mine, Charlie, who I worked with, he was really into his comics. He was mainly a DC fan, and he kind of taught me all about the classic Batman, so like Year One, the Frank Miller, the Dark Knight stuff, and he lent me a couple, and then I went out and kind of researched from there what ones I should read, and it kind of just expanded, and then I realized that actually really I like the artwork, I like the pacing, the storytelling, all that kind of stuff, and I wondered if I could do it, and I kind of that's where it really stemmed from. So yeah.
Nice, that's awesome. And how about you, Jonathan?
The first comics I read were the Beano and Dandy. My nan used to come to visit us every Saturday, and she would bring me my Beano and Dandy, and I would sit and read them both that day and then throughout the week as well. I slightly favoured the Beano because I just felt some of the characters were better. I kind of liked that it had more mischievousness than the Dandy. So you had the Bass Street Kids and Dennis the Menace and Roger the Dodger. They just seem to be a bit more mischievous and up to stuff they shouldn't be.
Nice. For you from there, so I assume you're quite young reading this.
24. No, yeah,
24,
I
yeah.
was really young, yeah.
Yeah, totally excellent. And at that point, were you creating your own comics at all?
No, I was. I think I was writing by then. I was writing from a very young age,
Mm.
but I didn't start writing comics until probably about when Luke was getting into them, about 2013, 2012, something like that, which is when I started getting into American comics, because I'd done the kind of kid stuff here, the Beano and Dandy, and then I'd progressed as I got a bit older to Asterix and Tintin. And then I kind of didn't really read comics that much um, until I saw a documentary called Finding, I think it was called Finding Ditko, by Jonathan Ross. And it
Hmm.
was basically his love letter to Steve Ditko, whilst
Yeah,
he was also trying desperately to meet the man himself.
yeah.
Um, and it was
I
just,
think that's available on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it. I think.
it's such a good documentary.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't so much, I mean, a part of it was seeing Ditko's artwork,
Hmm.
but a lot of it was just the passion that Jonathan Ross clearly had for comics, and it just made me think I was missing out on something. So I think I went to Forbidden Planet the very next day, and I picked up just some random like grab bags, and a couple of issues of Spider-Man. It was Straczynski's run at the time. It was the Back in Black arc, and that was it. Then I kind of started doing research and figuring out what books I need to buy, um, to where I should start my collection from. And yeah, that was it. It went from there.
Amazing. And how did the your role at Titan come about?
That was a trip to Forbidden Planet, because it had become like my favourite shop. If I was in central London or wherever, I'd always pop in and get some comics.
Mm.
One day they had a sign on the door asking for temporary Christmas staff. So I applied and got it, and I didn't leave at Christmas and was there just over a year. Um, and Titan Comics, or Titan Entertainment Group, which owns Titan Comics, also owns Forbidden Planet. So they used to post vacancies in the store so that we could apply as internal applicants. And an assistant editor job came up at Titan Comics, and I went for it. Uh, I I kind of knew, roughly about the industry, but I also taught myself to letter a bit, which is something that came in useful for that job. And I had just started to try and get a group of friends together to start a little anthology. So I was editing that at the time, and I'd written stuff for comics as well. So I felt like I was in, with a pretty good shot of getting it, considering it was an entry level position. And yeah, I did.
That's fantastic. That's what it's all about. Kind of, getting yourself in the right place so that when the right time comes along, then you're kind of prepared for that opportunity. And sounds like you grabbed the bull by the horns. So, bully for you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really that. It was just a string of coincidences. The fact that
Yeah.
I happened to go to FP on that day, the fact that the person I was with saw the advert on the door for staff, it wasn't me. And then yeah, as it turned out, they owned Titan Comics, and yeah, it was all just coincidence.
Nice. And a little bit of hard work as well, I'm sure. And kind of, actually being able to, you know, string a sentence or two together so that you can actually be successful through the interview as well.
I'm not sure I strung any sentences together. Their biggest note from my first interview was very nervous.
Oh,
And I think it almost lost me the job, but by the time it came to the second interview, I'd kind of chilled out a little bit.
nice. Excellent. Oh, that's cool, man. Now, heading back to our castaway cottage, the next question that comes up is what's the funniest comic you've read?
Um,
And let's start off with, you, Jonathan.
I, I I struggle to think when I'm asked, what specific comic fills this criteria. But I think funniest for me would probably have to be Shirtless Bear Fighter. It came out a few years ago by Image. It was just ridiculous, but in
Yeah.
all the best ways. It was such beautiful nonsense. And I think that kind of played a part in Disco Noughts, because before that, I'm not sure I would have thought that a comedy comic could work, because I didn't remember really seeing many kind of outright comedic comics. But yeah, it's just beautiful nonsense. I adore that book. I've read it through a few times. Yeah, just silly.
Totally, it's fantastic, and it's come up on the pod a fair few times. So, yeah, you're definitely on the same wavelength there. And for you, Luke?
For me, it was Sex Criminals, another Image Comics one as well. I think
Great.
again with Jonathan, it was the first time I'd come across humor like that used in a comic, because most of my backlog and reading backlog was always quite dark and gritty. It was a 90s, 80s, 90s Batman where things were starting to get a bit dark, and it was just a complete change of pace. And I enjoyed the art. I thought that was funny, but just the whole premise and the gags and everything like that was just, I don't know, it was different, and I like that, and it was something that didn't take itself too seriously, which again, like Jonathan said, I think reflects in the way that we've done Disco Noughts.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, another great example of a humorous comic done well. Again, come up a few times on the pod. So, yeah, it's great to see that come up again. Now, changing gears a little bit around the campfire. The next question that comes up is, what's the saddest comic that you've read? And let's start off with Luke for that one.
So I really struggled with this one, and I've kind of picked a moment, I guess, and it was more because of the shock of it, because it was early doors, and it was something I was reading, and it was when Robin was beat to death by the Joker in Death in the Family. I don't know if you remember that arc, but that was really, really just. I didn't expect it. I didn't want it to happen. It just did, and I think that for me is what it kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, and it's quite a shocking image, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
With Batman holding Robin in his arms, and it's
Yeah.
like, oi, that doesn't look fun. Yeah, no, that's a absolute classic. And how about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I really struggled with this one as well, because I've
Yeah,
definitely read a lot of comics with sad moments in, but I can't really say that any of them have ever massively affected me, which is odd, because I am I'll cry at the drop of a hat, which is why I've never read Mouse, because I know I will cry. um, but yeah, so I'm not sure. I think I do always kind of feel when I read Watchmen, I kind of feel for Dr. Manhattan when he takes himself off to the moon just to be alone and away from all living things. That kind of touches me, and also I can sympathise with that.
yeah. Yeah, no, totally. That's a fair point. It's funny how kind of when you can empathise, it kind of makes you sad as well. Just because I guess you can understand the full veracity of the situation, and obviously Doctor Manhattan's in quite a predicament.
Yeah, exactly.
He knows everything that's going on at the same time, and obviously he needs to get a bit of space,
Yeah.
definitely. But no, yeah, I get where you're coming from there for sure. Now, changing gears once again, what's the scariest comic that you've read? And let's start off with you, Jonathan.
So I haven't quite gone for scary. I've gone for horrifying, which
Great.
is same ballpark. And it was the first volume of Crossed by Garth Ennis. I'd heard a bit about the series, and actually, when I was working at FP, a quite well-known film director came in asking for Volume 1, and we all wondered if he was about to make a film of it. So I think I read it after that, and wow, yeah, I think I needed some therapy after reading that. It genuinely is horrific, and some of the there's one particularly quite famous scene that I probably can't even describe on here. But yeah, it involves a family and their fate at the hands of the crossed. Yeah, I'm still not kind of sure if Ennis was trying to say something with it or just trying to be as gory and brutal as possible. But I actually did stick with it for another couple of volumes before I ducked out. And I was speaking. I think it was Cy Spurrier came in for a signing once, and he had written the web comic. It was up online for free. I think it's called Wish You Were Here, crossed Wish You Were Here. And I asked him if he intended to write anymore, and he going through that process of writing for that series seemed to have really kind of got to him, and I don't think he was that keen to go back to that place.
Yeah, it probably caused a few emotional scars, definitely.
Yeah, you'd need a few to, I think, see that series through, writing or reading it.
Definitely. And how about you, Luke?
For me, horror hits me in a different way because I always find that music adds a big element for me for horror. But I think I would say one of the creepiest moments is when I read Preacher for the first time, and it was his grandma when you first meet her, just her whole demeanor, the way she's portrayed, like her lackeys, all that kind of stuff. Just that was really creepy, and I went to a degree I would say very horrifying for me and to come across that so early on in my comics career was quite something. It's definitely not crossed material, but it's still it's still up there for me.
Still creepy.
Yeah,
Yeah, anything that kind of makes your hair stand on end, definitely.
exactly.
Nah, but yeah, no. Well, obviously Garth Ennis has nailed it for both of you on that, so that's awesome. Now we come on to one of my favourite questions, and that is, what is your favourite cover? And let's start off with you, Luke.
So my favorite cover is going back to, or one of my favorite covers, should I say, is going back to the Capullo run on Batman. He did the dancing Joker where Joker's dancing with Batman's empty suit. I don't know if you know that one, but that was just phenomenal. So simple, and it was raining as well. It was so simple, and just that simplicity with like just set the tone for the story. And I thought it was awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one off the top of my head, but yeah, no, I can imagine it being quite evocative. And then, how about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, I struggled with this. Having worked at a comics publisher and in a comic shop, I must have seen thousands upon thousands of comic covers. So I I can't really pinpoint, a specific favorite cover. I am a bit of a sucker for um tribute covers, like movie poster
Yeah.
recreations or album recreations. There was um a Doctor Who one where um Peter Capaldi's been drawn as if he's David Bowie on the front cover of, I think it might be.
Yeah, I think I remember that one.
That was really good. I really liked that. I can't quite think who drew it. Also, what really popped into my head was I'm not quite sure on how you pronounce his last name. It's David Aja or David Aja. His covers on Hawkeye, the Matt Fraction run, were really cool, and also he did a cover for 2000 AD. I think it was Prog 2000, and it's mostly black, and Dread is just monotone with little bits of red picked out. It's just a really simple, cool cover.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's difficult to pin down just even one or two, but great to have some notable mentions there. And just whilst you were talking, Jonathan, I managed to find the Batman cover, Luke, and I believe it's issue 17, Batman, and it's a fantastic artwork, and as you say, it's very well, as I said, it's very evocative with the Batman suit being empty, but there's also bits of blood there as well, so obviously that tells a story as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an image you won't forget very quickly, and it's just
No.
just everything, just the gesture of the way the Joker is dancing and holding the suit.
Yeah.
I can't have enough good words to say about it.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but there's something Bruce Forsyth about the Joker in this one. I tell you what, in his younger days, like maybe like 50 or 60, I reckon he could have been a good Joker, Bruce Forsyth, like a
I think
really
you might
kind
be
of
right.
the what? Sorry,
I said I think you're right there. That would be
yeah,
interesting.
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic to see Bruce's dark side, definitely. Excellent. Now, moving on to another of my favourite questions, and that is, what is the most meaningful comic to you? And let's start off with you, Jonathan.
Meaningful. So yeah, I think for meaningful, it would have to be something that I've been involved with. I think those are the things that mean the most to me. Which is maybe a bit of a cop out, but so it would probably be the small press comic I mentioned earlier, Future Quake, the issue where I had my first ever strip published. Just because, yeah, I still remember exactly where I was when I opened that email to say that they were accepting my strip, because I'd had a lot rejected before that.
Mm.
And I'd been in touch with the editor and talked through what I was doing wrong and what I was doing right, and to finally get one in, it was a really kind of special moment. It's only a small press comic. It probably only sells a handful, but it means a lot to me. And and finally getting something published in there was a big deal for me. So I'd probably say that.
100%, man. No, that's fantastic, and kind of getting that first publication, it's amazing. You kind of feel like you're really making progress, I think, don't you?
Yeah, that was exactly it. I'd been writing for a long time, and I'd gone through that phase of writing movie scripts and TV scripts and stuff.
Mm.
But something kind of clicked with me when I started trying to write comics, and it seemed to, I don't know, make more sense to me to stick with that, and it was something I was really enjoying. So yeah, to finally get some recognition that you're not the worst at this, and that someone else had seen some value to something that I'd written. It was a really big moment for me.
Oh, that's fantastic, man. And then how about you, Luke?
So this one was probably one of the easier questions for me to answer, actually, because I have it with me next to me. I always have it by the time I bed. It's a comic called Green Manor by Donny Bodart and Fabian Velman. I've butchered their names and I apologize for that. But
Mm.
yeah, it's almost like a bunch of short stories set in Victorian London. And it's just the reason it's meaningful to me is because it was really the catalyst for me striving for a cartoony style. I was studying my art at this time, and I was torn between whether I should be representative with my artwork and be a bit more kind of true to life, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or do I go down the cartoony route and really look at character and gesture and all that kind of stuff. And I read this book, and just the way that it was done, and the fact that you could have a cartoony style but still be quite dark and gritty, but take away from that and make it fun and light as well. It was just, yeah. So that's why it's meaningful to me.
That's fantastic, and it's great to kind of have that anchor, isn't it? That you can kind of go back to, and that was a real kind of turning point for you as an artist. Just looking at it now, I can definitely see the similarities, and it's great that you found a muse in that. So that's great, brilliant. Now, going back to the cottage, the next question that comes up is what's the most underrated comic? And let's start off with you, Luke.
So I'm not sure if it's classed as underrated, and it's in the same vein as Jonathan speaking earlier about the Beano and the Dandy, but it's more of a Scottish version. It's a set of comics called Urwully or the Bruins. It's two different comics, but very kind of in the same vein as like a Beano or a Dandy. Very humorous, and it's just about it kind of more of a snapshot of everyday Scottish life with all the with the language that's used, and yeah, I just think that it needs to be known more. It needs to be known more in a bigger audience in comics. I think. I mean, it's a long running thing, but it's still just brilliant.
That's fantastic. Is it still being published?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to get one of the collectors. Either get the Urwelly collection every year for Christmas, or I get the Bruins one, depending on it. They kind of switch it every year.
Nice. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm not sure that I've actually come across that one before, so that's definitely going to go on my to read list. So thanks for making me aware of that.
No worries.
Excellent. And how about you, Jonathan?
For me, I think it's Four Kids Walk Into a Bank. It's by Matthew Rosenberg, who's now doing everything at Marvel. And the artist was Tyler Boss. It was on who published it? Black Mask. It was one of their first sort of handful of comics. They were one of those publishers that came out really strong and seemed like they were going to challenge Image to be the creator owned imprint, and then it didn't quite pan out that way, or hasn't yet. But the first issue just grabbed me straight away. Matthew Rosenberg really set up all the characters well and kind of swiftly. It's straight away there's labels over each character, so you're like, oh, okay, I know who these people are, and he doesn't take a whole issue to explain that. He gets straight into the story. And the first issue, and maybe all of the issues, or certainly the first couple, all open with huge action scenes, which are completely imagined by the kids that are the main characters. They're playing like role playing games, and we're seeing their game as if it was live action, and then it cuts back to the kids. And even the lettering on that comic was just really cool. It was stuff I hadn't quite seen before, and everyone looked like they were having a lot of fun with it. And I remember I was working in FP at the time, and someone came in one week, a regular. So he knew his comics, and he bought a lot of comics. And he asked for a recommendation one day, and I recommended that to him. I think it was on about issue 3, maybe, and he picked up the first issue, and he was back in the next day to get the other 2. And he specifically sought me out and shook my hand and said, "Oh, what a great recommendation! It's such a cool comic." And it's just a lot of fun, and it's so well written, and the art's just beautiful. It's the only comic from which I own a piece of original art. I bought one of the pages.
Wow, that's cool. And have you got it hanging up somewhere, or is it safely away?
Yeah, it's usually hanging up. Right now, I'm sort of in the process of moving, so it's not. But yeah, usually it takes pride of place on the wall.
Definitely, in an environment cased, kind of glass case, I guess. No.
Yeah, a nice frame with a solid nail on the wall. Especially, once I heard it I'm not sure if anything's going to come of it now, but it was at one point optioned for a movie, and I suddenly thought, oh, my page might be worth something now.
Yeah. Tidy. Well, you never know. Maybe in the future, these things take time, don't they? But no, that's fantastic to get some original art for that, and great that one of your recommendations turned out well for somebody. And speaking of recommendations, the next question that comes up is, what comic would you recommend to a friend who's never read comics?
So I actually had this recently. I met up with a friend I haven't seen for a bit, and he's probably one of the few friends I have that doesn't read comics, has never read comics. So I don't so much have a recommendation for people who haven't read comics, but for this specific friend of mine, I recommended The Rabbit by Rachel Smith. Just because I know him and I know he'd want a story with, some emotional depth to it. And that's why I picked that one. I love Rachel's art style. It's possibly not for everybody, but I find it really fun and really colourful. And there's always a lot going on in terms of emotions and what characters are going through. So yeah, the rabbit was the first thing that popped into my head when I was thinking of something for him.
Yeah, oh no, that's spot on, and yeah, no, it's always a difficult question because it always depends on the friend and whatnot. But great that you actually had a real life experience to draw upon. But now for you, Luke, what would you recommend?
Well, if I wasn't going to say Green Manor, because that would be cheating, because everybody used that, it would be Black Sad. For me,
Yeah,
I'm one of those people. I'm like, when I watch a movie, I look at the movie for the artistic quality of it, right? The way it's shot, all those kind of things. For me, I don't always get the story the first time round, so that makes it fun because I can watch it again. So that's the same with Black Sad. Black Sad for me was just so visually stunning that I had to, to read it again to actually read the story. And I would say people who don't really know much about comics or want something that's kind of different. It's got anthropomorphized animals and it's just like a noir. It's almost like an old school noir kind of story. It's just that was it for me.
nice. Two great recommendations that I recommend everybody check out. Now, coming on to our last question, and that is, if you could only take one comic into the apocalypse, which would it be? And let's start off with you, Luke.
That would be Green Manor every day. It's one of those I never
Great.
get bored of. It's kind of it's staple. Like I said, it was beside my bed all the time. If ever I get bored or need some kind of inspiration, it's always there for me. It's a bit like my tattered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's like one of those books I've never got bored of. So it's one of those that has a very special place in my repertoire.
Great. And then how about for you, Jonathan?
Well, I get bored quite easily, so the thought of taking one comic, it wouldn't entertain me for very long. So I was thinking, what's the biggest comic I can think of? What would have the most, reading material in it that I could read it through, quite a bit without getting bored. So I thought of the Sin City omnibus. I think it's called the Big Damn Sin City, I think, and it's a massive book. It's the entirety of Sin City in one huge hardback that you could build a house out of. So yeah, it would probably be that, just for sheer length. I mean, they are good stories and it's a good book, but it's the one book I could think of that had the most amount of content in it that would keep me entertained for longer.
Definitely. That's fantastic. And then along with both of these books or tomes, what weapon, tool, or useful item would you like to take with you as well?
I mean, ideally, I can imagine multiple uses for a machete, but I don't. own one and don't know where I could find one. So I guess, yeah, the biggest knife I could find, if you're thinking of it's something that could be used as a weapon, but also for, you know, butchering animals for food, or even chopping food to cook with. So I guess just, yeah, the biggest knife I could find is something that would be useful.
Definitely. Fantastic. How about for you, Luke?
And for me, it would have to be an axe. Um, Partially
Nice.
for the same reasons as Jonathan, but also because where I tend to be, it's cold. You need a fire, and an axe will help with that in great leaps. So that, yeah, for me, an axe, because I think it's just more for the firewood than anything else. I'm not looking to kill many things, try and forage my food, but it's there if I need it.
Also, you probably have this view of yourself with your shirt off, swinging the axe around.
Like a lumberjack. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
like some weird TikTok video.
Fantastic. Jonathan Stevenson and Luke Barmer-Kemp, thank you both for sharing your comics for the apocalypse today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very
It's
much.
been
Thanks
fun.
for having us.
Great. And for the listeners, one more time, where can they find you online?
On Twitter's probably the best place. Twitter at the Disconauts, and then you can find both of our personal accounts in the bio from there.
There's also Instagram. You've got at Disconauts Comic as well, and then all our stuff's linked to that, so it's all easy peasy to find.
Amazing. And as I said before, all those links are in the show notes, folks. So go check out Disconauts and follow Jonathan and Luke on all the social interweb websites. Apart from that, do you see yourself going to any comic events later in the year at all?
I booked tickets to Thought Bubble with no clue as to whether it would end up going ahead, but
Oh, Jonathan just left us there for some reason. He just completely dropped. But how about you, Luke?
So I don't have any planned yet. It's one of those things where it's kind of something that I should really kind of try and get onto the back of and start attending more things. But one I would love to go to is Angoulême.
Yeah,
That would be that. I'd like that to be my first proper con. I've been to a few smaller ones and that, but that would like that to be my first big one. And try and experience something like that would be amazing.
definitely. That's fantastic. Hopefully Jonathan will join us back before before we say goodbye properly. It's been, as I said before, it's been an absolute pleasure, Luke. And everybody go check out Disconauts. And otherwise, I'm sure I'll see you on Twitter.
Thank you very much, and check out Disconauts. It's a laugh riot. Let's put it that way. It's all good. It's good fun.
Amazing. Thanks again, Luke. And
Thank
thanks, Jonathan, wherever you are. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks again to Jonathan and Luke for being on Comics for the Apocalypse. It was an absolute pleasure. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review for us on iTunes or whichever podcast service you use, as not only will it let me know that you liked it, but believe that it helps make other people aware of the show as well. If you'd like to check out Jonathan's and Luke's work or follow them on social media, those links are in the show notes, along with all our own links to the various areas of the internet. Speaking of which, if you haven't already, be sure to visit Comic Scene's website at comicscene.org for comic news, the comic club, and other fun sequential art stuff. And finally, as long as the apocalypse doesn't come to pass in the next week, I'll see you next Monday. Bye for now.